Hello, hello. It is the end of September, and so for the sixth time, yes, happy half year anniversary, I will be taking a look at the entirety of Weekly Shonen Jump for the month. This was a very, very eventful month for the magazine. We had 3 series end, including the legendary Jujutsu Kaisen pictured here, and 3 new series begin. So we've got a lot to talk about. It was a long month too, 5 chapters per series. Let's plunge in. First, we're going to be talking about me and Roboco. A fun variety of chapters this month. We had the return of a side character that I wasn't super into, this idea that Bondo had a hick friend that he grew up with that turned out to be a very pretty girl. I don't know, it's like very cliche, and I don't really like any sort of like love triangle aspect of the series. It just seems very unnecessary, and in this chapter they really leaned into it with some kind of like fan servicey stuff that just did nothing for me, so that was kind of a low point. But lots of other fun things too. To celebrate the 200th chapter, I believe, they had a silly one with the Roboco Juniors, her Cell Junior-esque creations, rushing lunch to school. One where she just imitates a character from a movie, which is just nice, straightforward parody. Even though I hadn't seen the movie, it really hit for me. They had one of their spooky stories. From time to time, Roboco will switch genres and just kind of do a creepy pasta-esque story that I think could actually be kind of chilling for young fans reading it, which is a lot of fun. And then, of course, Roboco also exists as this running meta commentary on Shonen Jump, so of course they had to have a chapter about the JJK finale, which was a lot of fun too. I especially thought it was very funny when they were talking about, at this rate, Roboco is gonna get canceled as well, and she's like, that'll be 3 legendary series that end in the short time span. We'll be famous for the history of Jump, and it's because, no, we'll just get canceled. That would be famous. So overall, not like my all-time favorite month of Roboco. Sometimes they have chapters that are just really transcendentally weird, whereas here, just sort of stuff I expect from the series, but it was still good. Give it a B+. Kill Blue, which is a series that I've had some ups and downs with, but lately have been getting a little more into. Had another solid month. There was a lot of setup for the next challenge that he has to undertake. If the series has gone on and off the rails so many times, but I'd say if there's any sort of central or core mode, it's this idea of our main character having to take on challenges in any battle to win the heart of Noren. Noren. So now they're doing this cavalry battle. I was kind of bored in the lead up to it, learning and preparing and whatever. It just kind of felt very by the book, going through the motions, not too interesting. But the battle itself has actually been pretty good. I blew my voice out singing karaoke. This is an ambitious video to make under such circumstances, but we're going to do our best. Once the battle began and they kind of just slipped into a very focused mode, I thought it was a lot better. And I think this is kind of the strengths of the series. If you look at this mangaka's most famous series, of course, is Kuroko no Basket. That was a series where like 99% of it took place in basketball games, right? That was like the meat of it. That's where all the emotional climaxes happened. And I think the series needs to operate in the same mode, where you set up a big action sequence with some sort of constraints, some sort of rules. This is sort of the challenges that I had mentioned, but even more kind of focalized and battle-oriented. And that's where, I think the strengths of the series lie, in terms of just having nice kinetic action and some cool choreography and some neat moments. I'm like kind of into it right now. It's not my favorite by any stretch, but I'll give it a B. Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi. When it started, I thought this is the most cliche thing I have ever seen in Jump. It seemed to kind of operate on new bounds of clichéness, and that hasn't really changed per se, but I am enjoying it way, way more than I thought I would. In this month, we got into, I'd say, a more substantial arc than any we've had before, but it's moving at a good pace too, where he's taking his exam to be a Grand Cross level exorcist. I love a good, fantasy exam arc. I just kind of like how the characters work with one another, but also battle against one another, and you get to build up a whole lot of side characters in interesting ways. You kind of have them appear and disappear and reappear within the arc in a way that kind of tantalizes you with their strengths and abilities. You can have a lot of cool settings. You can have a lot of cool mechanics. And I think as far as school arcs go, this is, or exam arcs go, this is, nowhere near as sprawling or ambitious as like the Chunin exams in Naruto or the Hunter exam in Hunter x Hunter, to use some famous examples. But it's very solid. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of funny moments. The art style remains really unique, expressive, and great. So yeah, it's quite interesting. And I think with this, they're kind of making a play to make this series sort of a hybrid action series with still some comedy and slice of life elements. And that sounds all right to me. It's not the first of those. It won't be the last of those. But if they can keep up this dynamicism, keep up the entertaining characters and everything, I'm in for it. So I'm giving this an A. I think it's just very solid. It's been the kind of surprise hit for me. And I'm curious to see where they go. I just want to see this world keep expanding. This one is tragic. I was really loving this series. If you go back to previous videos, you see me praise it at great length. And they ended it. They canceled it. This is what you get into when you read Jump series. I think in many other magazines, this could have flourished. This could have run for years. But by the cruel acts of the Jump editors, it's ended after only 17 chapters, not even making it to the proverbial 21 club. The ending was very nice, though. It wrapped up the major conflict and sort of mystery within the series in a way that I found quite nice and sad and sentimental, and a little bittersweet. The ending itself was full of hope and connection and optimism. Obviously they couldn't really give much of a definitive wrap-up in such a short time, so instead it's your traditional, and now the characters will just go on living happily with each other, blah, blah, blah. But it was, especially bittersweet, thinking that that's all we got from this series that had so much potential and so much love to give the world. It's disappointing, but I'm kind of glad that the series never really went off the rails. It had never ranked super highly in the popularity polls, so probably the author as well knew that the end was near. There was definitely a sense of a bit of experimentation near the end, trying to make a little more tense situation, a bit more of an arc. But in the end, it stuck to kind of its emotional core. It stuck to the appeal that had brought it whatever little fan base it had. Well, yeah, it's sad. I love this series. I hope the physical volumes get localized at some point. I'd love to buy it. I hope it does get a second volume, maybe with a bonus chapter in there to make up for the fact that it's not quite enough material for a second volume. I really, really hope the author has a lot of success after this. It's one of the very few series that I think has dared to work in the mode of Yotsuba. That isn't about a housewife with gigantic breasts. I think working in this sort of mode with such a kind of down-to-earth suburbanism, with such a respect and detail and everything, it's all too rare, and it takes a lot of ambition, and the series was pulling it off just for such a tragically short amount of time. So I'll give this an A+, which I think is pretty consistent with what I'd given the series in previous months. It ended on the good note that it had going the whole time. Witch Watch, which is, my probably top 5 series, maybe my 5th favorite series running right now. I just think this is an unbelievably solid sitcom-ish comedy. There was a bit more sort of plot development. A character introduced last month was given a lot more backstory and focus, with a couple chapters where she's kind of the lead character, which is interesting. It's strange in sitcoms as well as manga like this, where you have an ever-expanding cast. In sitcoms, it's usually because an actor or actress wants to leave, wants to stop playing that character, so they just sort of write the character off and bring somebody in who's kind of a role replacement. In manga, of course, characters can come back whenever they damn well please. And I think in long-running comedy series, this is kind of a tool that they use strategically to introduce new genres at certain times by bringing back a character whose genre is that shtick. But I think because Witch Watch has like a real kind of persistent life aspect to it, where they do a really good job kind of making you understand that these are quote-unquote real people. Basically, all I'm trying to say is that it feels stranger when you realize that a character that was a big deal for a while, like the Dragon Girl Ban, I don't think appeared in any chapters this month, and maybe was just sort of referred to once or twice. Meanwhile, this new girl, the child prodigy actress witch, becomes a major focal point. How long will she remain a major focal point? You know, she doesn't show up in every chapter, but she's kind of like the main guest character right now. And eventually I think that will end too, and another one will rotate in. It's quite interesting, and it kind of gives a bit of an arc structure to a series that's otherwise very episodic and just sort of goofs and gags. With all that said, we had two such traditional kind of goofs and gags episodic chapters. One about a body swap mishap, which is always fun. That was very funny. And another one where it's like the author's special interest thinly disguised as a manga chapter, where they go vintage clothes shopping, which I really love those. I think it's a delight. I like learning about vintage clothes. I think it's a really cool scene. And yeah, so I'm always happy to get one of those. And then at the end, we actually got some actual plot. This is the other kind of X factor of Witch Watch, is that underlying all the goofs and gags is actually a fairly serious and heavy and sometimes action-packed plot. We hadn't had a single step forward along those lines in probably like half a year. So that's always, interesting. And this time they married a pretty emotionally intense moment with one of the most outrageous and bizarre gags of the whole series, which is a doll made out of bread that comes alive with someone's personality but can only speak by doing bread puns. So they took what probably had the potential to be like an actually emotionally powerful, resonant moment and married it with that, which I think really embodies the whole spirit of this manga. Yeah, I love it. A+. RuriDragon, we had 2 chapters this month. I think the chapters themselves were kind of strange, honestly. It's still kind of these main themes of Ruri trying to come into her own and be more present in her life and explore things that she never would have done before, like being on the student council for the sports festival, while at the same time dealing with prejudice and bullying and people talking behind her back, all to do with her bizarre dragon powers. And these chapters like really leaned into the latter plot line with these new characters that are like really mean to Ruri and just shit talking her behind her back and talking about how gross she is, which is pretty painful to read. And then they orchestrate this revenge plan that is just like really bizarre and kind of surreal, and it caught me off guard, and it made me think at once that for a long time I considered the series to be one of the most kind of like grounded in psychological reality of Jump series. Everybody really acted like real people, and there was like a reasonableness to it. And I liked that. I liked that it was very grounded. I thought that was like a nice thing to explore in Jump. Just sort of these social dynamics and how people perceive each other, and nothing kind of idealized or over the top. Now it's gone very over the top in a very, very weird way. And to me, that's not wholly a negative, because it's interesting. And it makes me think that a lot more strange and interesting things might be in store for us. And that we can't use, oh, well, everybody will remain a reasonable person, or things just won't get that bizarre as a way to predict the plot in any capacity. It's kind of like everything is on the table now. So yeah, very curious about that. I'll give it an A. I just was quite compelled by a feeling of what the hell is happening. And although at the end, yeah, you can say, well, they kind of explained it and it turns out this was somewhat a reasonable plan, at the same time, it was a really crazy thing happened. And it was just an intense and sort of grotesque scene. So yeah, very, very curious about kind of how that spirit will continue within the series. The Super Psychic Policeman Shojo, another gag comedy that I quite enjoy, had 5 just fun standalone gag chapters this month. No attempt at an arc, no real attempt at plot development or character development. The woman who excessively fantasizes and causes our psychic policeman to become inevitably trapped in delusions because he cannot help but read her mind came back. I really like that sort of shtick. Again, I think these gag series operate by kind of building up a repertoire of jokes and then bringing them back and combining them. It did well at that. Very fun chapter about a puppy. Very fun chapter about growing vegetables with psychic powers and becoming a viral sensation. My favorite of the month about a gorilla. Lots of great drawings of the gorilla. The idea that nobody can tell the difference between his partner and the gorilla. Very funny. And then the latest chapter where Chojo goes undercover as an idol, leading to delusions and some unintended results. Yeah, very fun. I don't know, just solid B+. Again, I think it's just doing the gag comedy stuff and building up this gag repertoire, and I hope it continues to have a chance to do so. Nue's Exorcist this month had, I think, my favorite chapter of the entire series so far. Where suddenly they introduced some new kind of power levels. There was some internal lore of the series being built up in ways that I thought were kind of dramatic and interesting. It was something that made me think, okay, like they actually do have some ideas here. They do have some imagery. They do have some stuff that kind of looks cool. And I was like, yeah, all right, I can maybe get into this. I just kind of felt like they did a good job showing the gulf of power between the characters we're used to seeing and this new kind of threat. And that's the sort of stuff I like to see in Shonen. That's the sort of stuff that builds up hype in Shonen. I was like, all right, like maybe they're kind of getting it. And then after that, it sort of went off the rails again. You know, we had the kind of excruciatingly unnecessary scene of them celebrating and debriefing after the mission that I just sort of felt like, I do not care about any of these characters enough for this to matter to me. And then we went from that thrill ride into everyone's favorite, another training arc. Wow, I can't... We just had one of these. We had a training arc and then one fight, and now we're going to have another training arc? Like, there was nothing else. There was no, like, adventure part. There was no, oh, I'm hitting my limits part. They're skipping steps. And even worse, they're skipping steps not just in the battle shonen part, which is just sort of generic and uninteresting, but in the harem element, which I find unbearable. Just so trite, so flat. Not in terms of the girls, obviously. So fetishy and wish-fulfilly and just, like, pathetic. And again, they're skipping steps instead of kind of having faith in themselves to build up a collection of interesting relationships where readers are, of course, encouraged to hope that our pathetically bland main character ends up with their favorite of the girls. Instead, they're like, okay, as a plot point, as part of your training, you have to confess to one of the girls in 5 days. And the whole chapter is just this almost like meta commentary on the fact that, yeah, there's like 18 girls that are interested in you. You gotta pick one. And then it went right from that into goofy harem shenanigans. Stumbling into each other bathing, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, that was a very, very sour note to end the month on. But despite that, I again say that this series, to me, had its most interesting stuff yet. When it revealed just kind of the scale and scope of the higher powered entities, and when it, allowed us to just sort of enjoy that sort of imagery and that sense of power. And I was like, it made me a little hopeful for maybe future arcs or for the big climactic battles or whatever, but we just got to wade through so much tedium to get there. But I'll give it a D+. Mostly off the strength of that one chapter, I'll give it a D+. which is, again, I think the highest the series has gone yet. All right, totally switching gears to something I absolutely loved this month was Akane-banashi. I've talked at length before about how much I love this series, and I think what has been encouraging me more and more is that the series is stepping into a mode where it feels like it could run for a very, very long time. They're setting up lots of different plot threads, lots of different characters, lots of different rivalries and challenges left unfulfilled. Things that, they can come back to, like cards in their hand. Which is an image I use a lot for One Piece, that I think Oda writes very smartly to leave a lot of cards in his hand to deploy in future arcs, to resolve, to give moments of catharsis amid setups for other things or other mysteries unfolding. I think this month really exemplified how it is switching into that mode, with kind of your look around the world and wrap up chapters, with moments of Akane doing some soul searching, trying to develop internally her own understanding of Rakugo. I was trying to get a freaking little piece of tinfoil out of my keyboard and I just knocked it further in. Anyways, I loved especially when Akane conceptualizes her own Rakugo journey as like a Dragon Quest style RPG. That was a lot of fun. And then in a very One Piece-esque chapter, and something we've seen One Piece many, many times, we check in with almost all of the characters reading a newspaper article about Akane and commenting on her continued rise through the ranks of Rakugo. And it works in One Piece for a reason. It works in Akane for a reason. Where the heck? I just lost the tab with my notes. Oh my god, this is a train wreck. What the fuck? Where did it go? It's okay, I can just open it again. I just closed it. Somehow. Without interfacing with my computer at all, with my psychic policeman abilities. Anyways, yeah, that all stuff is great. Really speaks to the longevity of the series. The one thing that surprised me, though, is that a plot element that was brought up last month that I thought was sort of a deep-seated foreshadowing for the endgame of the entire series is actually getting paid off a lot sooner than I thought. And to me, that doesn't necessarily mean the series is ending or anything, but just sort of a sense of, it's going to go even further than this. And then as much as I praised all of that sort of context building, all of that bouncing around to different characters mode, to me, the most impressive part of this month was at the beginning when we got to see the end of Shiguma's performance. Last month I was praising to high heaven how well they embodied his mastery of the art form, how chilling and unsettling and memorable they made his story, and the finale just lived up to all of that and more. I just cannot get over how well Rakugo is depicted in the series, and how, despite, interesting characters and interesting relationships and lots of intrigue and drama, at the end of the day, the best parts are still the Rakugo performances. Those are still the high points of the whole series for me. Anyways, we're going to give this an S for the month. Very good stuff. I love this series. Here's another one I love, Sakamoto Days. With everything freaking ending in Jump, it's nice to have Akane and Sakamoto as two of my favorite three series that seem to have no signs of slowing down or stopping soon. One Piece as well, it's in its final saga, but it's still going to be here for years. My favorites are still going to be sticking around. Much apologies to the others. With Sakamoto, yeah, we got an arc that is an arc written by someone who is very comfortable with its longevity, that expects to be doing this for many years yet, where a side character, granted one of the most major side characters, but not, Sakamoto himself, the protagonist, teams up with another side character to infiltrate a prison in order to contact someone that will help with his training. So that's, fairly tangential to the actual main plot involving our main protagonists and antagonists. It's something that feels sort of like a side story, but in a really fun way, where it's just like, yeah, we get to enjoy these characters. They're doing it kind of in the mode of One Piece's fantastic Impel Down arc, where a lot of other side characters from the past that have ended up in this prison now come back, which is a whole lot of fun. Also similar to One Piece, it's about working your way down into more and more cutthroat and hardcore levels of the prison where stronger prisoners are being held. That structure is a whole lot of fun too, you know. I'm really eagerly anticipating what it's like in the lower levels and what sort of the horrible people they're going to have to meet and fight down there. And, you know, this is just like A-plus shonen arc writing. This is just doing everything right for me. It's not mind-blowing, it's not super spectacular, but it does have awesome action scenes like everything in the series does. It's just sort of Sakamoto Days doing what it does. And I'm loving it. So it'll get an A+ for the month. Astro Royale, I think, has been getting a lot more popular. It's been climbing up the table of contents, and I'm glad to see it because I think it's moving in a good direction. I wasn't really a fan of the initial arcs. I wasn't super compelled by the initial fights. But now that they've kind of relaxed the pace a little bit and opened it up to different types of intrigue, and now are kind of like undercutting even the premise of the series by suggesting that there is greater conspiracies at play and giving us little teases of who the real villains of the whole story might be, it really has gotten a lot more interesting, and I have to give a lot of kudos to that. I think maybe at first, what's-his-face, Tokyo Revengers Man, was like, oh, I'm going to write a shonen. In shonen, people just kind of like punch each other, right? And there wasn't much to it besides that. But now I think he understands better what actually hooks an audience and what builds up a loyal readership. And that's intrigue and that's mystery. And this month had a lot of cool twists and stuff in that regard. I'm not like totally sold yet. I think the plotline they're setting up in its own way is still quite cliche. You know, there was nothing that really shocked me yet. A lot of the twists sort of fell flat because it's like, ooh, we're learning the true history of this character. So this character only showed up like 3 times. I'm not like, you know, awestruck. You know, it doesn't feel like my mind hasn't been blown or anything. But, you know, despite all that, yeah, I think it's moving in a good direction and that more and more of these things will get fleshed out and will become more unique. So yeah, it's getting there. We'll give it a B. Like Kill Blue, I think it's starting to play to its strengths more. Whereas Kill Blue, I think, needed to simplify itself. This one needed to complexify itself a little bit. And now they're sort of meeting in the middle as a series that I'm, you know, not the biggest fan of, but I have some optimism for. And here's another one that I'm not really generally super into. Oh, my nose is getting stuffy too. Ugh. Let me get some water. And another series that's been running and Jump for a long-ass time that I think is going to be ending quite soon. We are indeed in the final battle of the final battle arc. All of the other enemies have been defeated. Now it is just main protagonist versus main antagonist, squaring off in a battle both of spouting ideology at each other and monologuing back and forth, but then also punch-kick fighting, and neither of them are working for me all that well. The fight scenes in the series have never really been that interesting to me. Sometimes they have kind of like cool imagery or cool concepts, but at the end of the day, it just sort of feels like very generic. I use my thing! Blah! Blah! I use my thing! Blah! And the fact that the thing is really different for each of them doesn't really seem to affect like the choreography or the pacing of it or the dynamicism of it. It's all very kind of one note. Same with the ideology. It's nothing really interesting is being presented. It's kind of the same conflict that we knew about like 7 villains ago. Now it's just this guy saying it and being like, and yes, this was all my plan, which all the other ones said too. I think what bugged me the most is in the latest chapter, they spent a whole long time devoted to explaining exactly how the magic powers of the main character worked, referencing all these like different moments throughout the series and being like, yes, it was a combination of when this happened and this happened and this happened. And to me, that is like not at all necessary. I think it's kind of meant for you to think, "Oh, that's so clever. They set it up." But they didn't really set it up. All of those moments like meant something else at the time. There wasn't any sort of sense where it's like, "Ooh, this is mysterious. I wonder how this is going to get paid off." It's more just that they went back and picked a bunch of stuff that happened and then were like, and that's the reason this last thing is happening. Like, it follows maybe some internal logic of the series, but the internal logic of the series is just magic, so who cares? Maybe, like, devoted Giga fans are, like, nodding in appreciation, going, ah, yes, it all comes together in this moment. But it just kind of reminds me of, like, Naruto, where by the end it was, like, everybody was just this kind of cocktail of different jutsus, and it all just had to do with like a bunch of BS stuff that you didn't really care about. Could they not just say, "Oh, he's a very special boy, and that's why, and that's it," and accept it or get over it? Did they really have to spend a whole half a chapter just explaining all of this? Ugh. If they were just fighting the whole time, that at least would have the potential to be fun and interesting and have cool choreography, even if it's unlikely it would. Despite all that, I'll still give it a C. I think the series definitely has modes that do much worse for it. There's nothing like Nue's Exorcist where I feel like embarrassed. It's just sort of eh. Undead Unluck had a real roller coaster of a month. Some of the most cathartic, powerful, we've been waiting for this type moments kicked off the whole thing. An awesome battle with our dear Andy. We hadn't seen him fight in so long. I love the dynamicism and choreography of all of his fight scenes, all the creative ways he uses his regenerative powers to fight, all the ways they integrate unluck into the fights. It's all so good, man. It's everything I love about this series. Well, not everything I love about this series. There's a million things I love about this series, but it's one thing that we hadn't seen in a while that I really love about this series, and it was so hype that it just exploded back into the plot. But then I had a little trepidation where I was like, well, this is probably signaling the end game. This is signaling the start of the final saga. The fart of the final saga might be more accurate, though. We're kind of led to believe that, yeah, there's these, like, 10 super climactic final villains. I think there's 10. Maybe there's, like, 13 or 12. Yeah, maybe 12. There's a bunch. And we had, as depicted on the cover of this volume, a really fun, really intense, really creative fight against one of them, Language. And then it's like, sweet, this final saga with our whole team collected, all the powers of humanity combined, is going to fight in, different distributions and stuff. All of these other final villains, one by one. They're all going to get awesome arcs like that. And that's going to be it. Maybe it'll be another 50 chapters or so. It's going to be awesome. But then the speed run started. And they actually, in the manga, said, we're starting the speed run. And a whole bunch of kind of mechanics of the series that we were led to believe would kind of orchestrate the structure of this last saga just got thrown out the window. In a moment that I will say was very surprising and very subversive. But in a way that I started going, oh, geez, they are running from the axe. Because Undead Unluck, unfortunately, has not been doing very well in the popularity polls. If you could call it a negator, you could call it unpopular, self-targeting, which is a real crying shame. I think this series is fantastic. I thought the anime did a good job. But I can understand that it's hard for it to build a readership. For one thing, if you haven't been reading it from the start and you just try to pick it up at a random point, you will not know what the fuck is going on. It is so complicated with so many mechanics and so many characters, and they all have powers, and the powers all have rules. And it's not the sort of thing I generally enjoy that much in Shonen, like that level of complexity. But they do just such a good job, like, introducing everybody and giving them major moments where you, like, really understand their capabilities in exciting ways. So it's, like, perfect if you've been reading it from the start and you get to have all those experiences and all these memories with these characters. It is so compelling. It is such a roller coaster. But, you know, if you just picked up the magazine to read something else, and at some point you're like, hey, let's give this Undead Unluck series a try, again, you are going to be so lost. You're probably not going to have a good time. And I think that's maybe the fatal flaw of the series. So yeah, it feels like our final saga has been downgraded into a final arc. It's like instead of each of these battles having their own arc with different characters and major climaxes, all of them are going to just kind of be happening at once, it seems. And I have no idea how long that's even going to take, but I am not betting on a high number. I bet by the end of the year, and probably much sooner, we're going to be making a tearful goodbye video for Undead Unluck as well. With that said, I want to remain optimistic. The series has really impressed me so far. I want to think that even if they are put into these horrible time constraints, they're going to do a good job, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And outside of this sort of meta realization, these were really exciting chapters. Although they were, you know, counterbalanced by the disappointment of realizing, oh, geez, this is truly ending fast. So with all that in mind, I'm going to give it an S-. I really, really enjoyed it. And I wish I could just sort of remain blindly optimistic and just kind of naively almost hope for the best ending possible. Look, it's Duang. No, Duang was something else. This is the one where they just went, I don't know how to translate this from the old Duang scans. Hee hee. I think in Chinese it just means like what. Okay, anyways. The Elusive Samurai went through a major sea change, pun intended, with this arc. This month of chapters, we ended not just an arc, but what really feels like a saga of the series. You know, a major cast of characters has now sort of lost their relevance, and our protagonists are moving on with a new crew to new adventures, to new battles, to new everything. There was a nice little selection of chapters near the start to kind of convey this transition, to give some closure to these characters and these moments, and to start setting up a new era. It's really cool in this series when they do these sorts of transitions, because it's not just like a transition in the manga. Like, this is reflecting an actual like new era of Japan itself way back in the 1300s unfolding. And I think they give it like the proper gravity and stuff. Appearances of things like the Emperor happened in this month, which is very, very rare. And having a direct impact on the story, which again feels so unprecedented that it really signals like something new is happening, which I really liked. At the end of that, we jumped wholeheartedly into this new adventure with a major nautical battle, which is a first for the series. I think it's very well depicted, very intense. The crashing waves, the rocking boats, everything, our elusive protagonists jumping from ship to ship. The supernatural elements came to the forefront. This is also just sort of a war between two gods and all of the ideologies of faith they represent. There are some really creepy and grotesque moments as well, which I think the series manages to pepper in at such a enticing and strange rate. Yeah, I'm still really enjoying this. We're going to give it an A for the month. There wasn't any like totally kind of transcendental. We're getting there. Transcendental moments, as there have been in other months. But very, very solid, very compelling stuff. Okay. Oh, I forgot to animate this. Anyways, Yokai Buster Murakami, it gets a B+. This is another pretty solid gag manga, and I think pretty much all of the gag manga this month got a B+. What I've noticed in the series is they truly are transitioning from being a series that is about the roasting of yokai, and that's kind of its formula, to a gag manga series that involves yokai characters and yokai exorcist characters. And it's a little bit of an awkward transition, because it's like that formula is what hooked me, that formula is what I found so funny, and as they start to kind of operate in other modes and make whole chapters where that premise doesn't even occur, starting to focus more on side characters, starting to focus on other kind of like emotional avenues, you know. One chapter this month is just two characters discussing their crushes on other characters and making game plans on how to seduce them. And it's just like, we're really kind of straying outside what, we originally thought the intent of the series would be. And that's okay. And, I admire that sort of ambition. And I think the sense of humor of the series is quite fun. And so, I have a lot of faith that they're going to be able to keep coming up with funny premises that don't have anything to do with yokai busting. But at the same time, I love the yokai busting. I love that you got to learn a lot about the yokai and their eccentricities and everything. I want more of that. I want to not ever stray too far from that formula. I want more just sort of totally episodic adventures where they encounter a yokai and insult it and capture it. Because that's a lot of fun, and that's something that nobody else had done before this series. Trying to make a school lunch to impress your friend that you have a crush on. The hair in my mouth. I've seen that 800 times. But making fun of the Kappa's perverse behavior until it gets so ashamed it defeats itself, I've only seen that in this manga, and, I want it to play to its strengths. So yeah, B+, still doing well, but I hearken for more yokai to bust and more yokai to learn about. One Piece only had 2 chapters this month, and as always, you can watch my standalone videos about them. I loved them both. One was in, like we were talking about with Akane, that sort of arc wrap-up, look around the world and check in on everybody mode, which I really enjoy. And the next one kicked off the next arc in a really fun, mysterious way, as Oda loves to do, just dumping you in there, in the deep end. You don't know what's going on. There's all sorts of crazy stuff happening. You have to kind of piece together what the context is going to be, what sort of story this is going to lead to. I thought, it was kind of obvious what was happening, which to me is that they are in a Lego play kit built by a giant who enjoys putting humans in there to play with. And now the Straw Hats are wreaking havoc. And that's why everything is giant, is because they're on Elbath, the land of giants. But looking at the comments, people seem to actually be kind of split on all of these assumptions. So we'll see. I like a moment in One Piece where we go, we'll see. And we mean like next week, we'll see. Not in 10 years, we'll see. I think One Piece is all about having short-term mysteries and long-term mysteries and medium-term mysteries. And this is a very fun short-term mystery that's going to kick off an arc that I hope is just fantastic. An arc that we've all been waiting for like 2 decades. The land of giants, baby. We're finally actually here. So yeah, One Piece, it gets an S. Just 2 great chapters. I don't know what else to say. I already talked about them for like an hour. Okay. Next, we got Hima-ten. Hima-ten, I was actually pretty impressed by so far. I was like, they seem to have a lot of respect for the characters. The premise is extremely cliche, but it's fine. It's not like embarrassing or stupid. And basically, I just kept waiting for it to get stupid. And this month, it really started tipping over to the stupid side. It started nice, with our main character and his crush going on, which was pretty much a date, and it was sweet and kind, and I think expressed the characters well and, respected them. Same with a chapter more focused on Himari. Again, it kind of felt like they were building up multiple sides to her character in a way that I thought was nice. And although there was a little bit of fan service, I was like, okay, this is, at least it's sort of like contextualized. It didn't seem like super out of the blue just for fan service. But it was a little bit, and I was kind of like, eh. And then, there's more sort of middling chapters, whatever. And then, this is kind of the moment I was waiting for. They introduced the 3rd girl, and she has big boobs. And I was like, okay, there we go. Now, it's all downhill from here. I think by the end of the year, we'll be up to like 5 girls. We'll have another even bigger boobs character, perhaps. The fan service started becoming more apparent. And even more insulting than that, we just kind of had confirmation of like, and yes, all these girls are in love with him. Why? It doesn't matter why. He's nice to them. That's all it takes. Did you know if you do 3 favors for a girl, she has to like you? It is written into the Japanese constitution. And it's like, it's just so trite. It's just so uninteresting. I felt like we were kind of entering a new era of rom-coms in Jump with Blue Box. But this one is old school. And honestly, sure. I think this sort of fan servicey rom-com is an institution in Jump. It has been for decades. And it's not like I'm mad that they're running another one. Of course they were eventually going to run another one. I thought I was at a point in my life where I was done reading these, but then I started this silly project of reading all of Weekly Shonen Jump every week. And so I'm reading another one. And that is what it is, but it doesn't mean I have to love it. I'll give it a B-. Because I think there's still some strong moments. I think the art is quite nice, and it hasn't gotten as stupid as a lot of them in the past have. It is what it is. Okay. Here we go. Blue Box, yes, the nice rom-com. Which in itself I think is starting to trip a little bit and stumble into some rom-com cliche holes. The stuff with the main couple is great. I think it's really well done. I thought it was a lovely romantic story. I loved how they got together. I love how they treat each other. I love the specialness of all these moments. It's very sweet. It's sweet and fulfilling. But now that that's kind of been established, there's been a major focus on side couples. And this is an area of risk with rom-coms. Once you start developing these side couples, do they actually have the same appeal as the main couples? If you try to incorporate the characters you've built up in these side couples into, like, you know, romantic leads in the sense of these arcs, can they sustain that? Or do they start to feel kind of thin? I think this is doing okay on that regard. Like, these are all actually very well-written and interesting characters. And I do feel quite invested to see them succeed or fail in their own kind of romantic adventures. But I think it's more because they have to kind of compress these stories. Some of the, like, dramatic moments to set up these things, or some of the conflicts, or some of the crises that emerge, just feel a lot more cliche and feel a little too reductive and simplified for this series. There are still, like, really nice moments where it gets a little philosophical. There was one where they discussed the idea of the feeling of being loved is the feeling of being truly seen, which really got me. I was like, oh, that's like a beautiful message they're espousing here, and the way that it was brought out through the characters I thought was very well done too. But at the same time, it's just, oh, my ex-boyfriend is stalking me. Can you take care of me? Oh, but I kind of like you and a different girl. It's like, oh, man, I've seen this all before. I thought you guys were supposed to be better than that. I also am a little disappointed that this is all taking place during a cultural fest arc. I love a good culture fest arc, but it doesn't really feel that much like a culture fest arc because it's mostly focused around these little isolated incidents of drama. You know, they still got a chance to do some fun culture stuff, culture fair stuff. You know, maybe our main couple will go around and look at stuff. That's always fun. But so far, it doesn't really feel like a culture fest. That's disappointing. I'll give it an A- though still. Like, the strength of that one chapter where they really discuss the nature of love and how it feels to be loved, that to me carries so much of what I love about the series that it really kind of buoyed up the rest of the stuff. Everything else though was fine. It's just fine. It's not as interesting as the main couple. Alright, this was another one that ended. Kyokuto Necromance. I kind of saw this one's ending coming. It wasn't doing so hot in the popularity polls, and then they just sort of emergency switched gears and made the fight they were having into the final fight. And then after that delivered what I felt was a very spiteful middle finger type ending to the editors of Jump, where a lot of stuff got wrapped up in kind of like a jokey way. And a lot of just, like, weird plot points got introduced. And you know what? It's, like, memorable, you know? I'll probably remember this ending a lot more than if they had gone for, like, a safe ending. I might remember this ending better than the ending of Psych House, for example, even though I liked Psych House a lot more. I did like this series. I thought it had potential. I really liked the style of it. I thought they were doing world building in kind of like an interesting way with a good level of restraint but intrigue. So I was disappointed that it got canceled, but I don't know. The way they ended it, I was just like, all right, then see ya. Like, it was just a strange, silly ending. But it is what it is. What it is. Typically, you don't see things go out this way because they want to maintain a good relationship with Jump. They want to sometime get published in Jump again. Maybe this Fusai Naba fellow doesn't care and is burning the bridge with Jump, and the ending certainly suggests that. So yeah, I'll give it a B plus. Like, I said it was a middle finger of an ending. I said it was very weird and goofy, and it is. But all of that, I think, makes it memorable and makes it like a positive thing for me. Kagurabachi got into the full swing of it with a new arc and really kind of a new saga, putting the series in a mode that I think it's going to stick with for quite a long time. You know, it's doing well in popularity. It's building up a real cult following of a fan base. So it's nice to see them kind of stretch out and breathe a little bit. You know, they had a very ambitious, kind of full-throated arc structure in the last arc, and now they're building up a similarly ambitious, similarly structured saga, where we're going around and meeting all the people that have contracts with the Enchanted Blades, learning about them, seeing their personality, seeing some flashbacks that build up the character. You know, your typical big shonen series type moves, getting some cool fight scenes with them, and then bridging that into an arc involving the next guy. And I think there's 7 of these, so they can be doing this for quite some time. And I think it's a good mode to be in. I think they're doing a good job making these sword bearers feel cool and exciting and unique. The most recent one, a blind swords master, I really, really liked as a character. I think he's very entertaining, very compelling. The way he fights is really cool. So yeah, I think this is the sort of mode I want to see it in, because I kind of criticized the last arc that it was very ambitious. It had a lot of different things going on, like essentially 4 different power factions competing at one event, and then the event itself had all these mechanics, and then there's the whole thing about the storeroom and the inherited powers of this family, and then their family dynamics, and there's just a lot going on, and I was like, it feels a little overstuffed. But here, it feels similarly ambitious in terms of how much they want to bring out of the story and the scope of it and everything, but it's a lot simpler. It's just very straightforward. Bad guys are coming to kill these dudes. We have to stop them. And I think that mode is where this series operates quite well. There's been a great variety of settings because of this, you know, going to each of the locations of the sword bearers. Very well depicted, very enchanting, interesting. So yeah, I'm in a position of high hopes for this series. I love in shonen where you meet somebody in some category or group or class, and you go, ooh, I can't wait to meet the rest of these guys. I hope they're all cool like this. That feeling, to me, if you can reliably deliver on that feeling in shonen, you're going to be a hit. And Kagurabachi, it's looking like a hit. Major pillars of Jump are down. We lost BNHA. We lost JJK. Somebody's got to step up and be the new pillar. It might be Kagurabachi. It might be. Unfortunately, it might not be Akane, which is what it should be. It's kind of Sakamoto Days, which it should be. It's not going to be Undead Unluck, although it should be. But it might be Kagurabachi, which would be totally alright. Okay. I'll give it a B+. Solid stuff. Solid stuff. Jujutsu Kaisen came to an end. I made a video about it that I think should have been published a little bit before this one, so you can check that out. Ultimately, I do not feel betrayed or outraged by this ending. I do not particularly feel so invested in the series that I am mad about power scaling, for example, or that they didn't wrap up XYZ plot point, or that the answer to ABC plot point wasn't what I expected it. I am a little disappointed, though, that I feel like in the end the series didn't play to its strengths. I think what made the series stand out from the pack and run for such a long time and develop such a big following was A, the anime. The anime was fantastic. You know, Studio Mappa killing it. But B, I think it took a lot of really modern shonen sensibilities in terms of um, subversion and twists and kind of presenting character archetypes that are a little surprising. The idea of like introducing Gojo and just being like, yeah, he really is just a god. He's unfathomably powerful and he's just there and on your side from the start. It's just sort of like a fun surprise, you know? And then this kind of like shocking, grotesque escalation, which I think harken backs to another era of Jump, um, blending those two things with a mentality to fight scenes that is both like super kinetic, super choreographed, super brutal and gory, while at the same time having almost like a JoJo's esque depth to the battle mechanics, you know, all the different ways things counter each other, the rules of domain expansion and stuff. And basically presenting this full buffet course of modern shonen where people can kind of pick and choose all the parts they like, and the parts they dislike aren't really going to drag it down. That to me was the appeal of JJK. That to me is why it was able to attract an audience that wasn't just big, but was largely comprised of people that aren't typically super into battle shonen, that may not have engaged with the genre in quite a bit, that aren't, say, huge One Piece fans, for example, but instead are getting into it through JJK. That to me was a big, big feat. And I think, though, in the end, all of these reasons, all of these nice things about the series, did not really show up all that much in the ending. Instead, it kind of felt like an ending that was like a love letter to the characters. You know, it was one where if you truly, really loved these guys and cared about them, you might be happy or relieved or feel some catharsis to see how it ended for them. But I wanted something crazy to happen. I wanted something weird and violent to happen. I wanted the characters to kind of get fucked with one last time. And, you know, I think that's maybe an unreasonable request. I think that's an ending that might have pissed off even more people rather than just sort of disappointing people. But at the end of the day, it really reminded me a lot of the BNHA ending, where it was just sort of like, well, this is what you want to see. If you love these guys, this is what you want to see. Okay, there it is. And there it is. Yeah, I'll give it a B+. I think that's what I gave the BNHA ending as well. Feel very similarly about it. It's just a little more disappointing for me because BNHA, it makes sense that it would end that way. You know, it's always been like a bread and butter series. Whereas JJK, I think, had like a real subversive potential that wasn't really brought out as much as it could have been here in the end. Okay, those are all of the series that we've talked about before. Now, to continue the insanity, here are 3 brand new series that started this month. Ichi the Witch was the first of these. The premise is pretty simple. It's a magical fantasy world where women have the ability to do magic. Some of them go their whole lives, actually, like the vast majority go their whole lives without tapping into this potential. But those who are interested can learn to use magic tools and spells, and the most magically gifted become witches that go around hunting these magical creatures and harnessing their powers. It's a kind of like video gamey type mechanic where you beat, a thunder spirit, and that gives you the spell zap, 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 or whatever. And I like that, though. I like that it's nice and simple, and it has a ton of potential. So, the premise of the series is that Ichi, who is male, and males have never once had magical aptitude before, manages, not using magic, but through hunting and survivalist tactics that he's honed by living alone in a mountain, manages to defeat a legendary magical beast and inherit its magic, thus becoming the first male witch, a subject of much controversy, and sort of the catalyst for this whole series to unfold. So it sounds quite cliche, and it is quite cliche, but it's being executed really, really well so far. The art is just gorgeous. There's these stunning big 2-page spreads in every chapter. I think the world building is fantastic so far too. I love all these little glimpses of magical society and the technologies they use. In the latest chapter, we go into the magical capital, and it's just the joy of all these things. The characters so far are really likable. Ichi is a nice hybrid of your typical dumb, happy shonen protagonist, and somebody who has like this intense esoteric skill set of hunting and trapping and killing beasts. Meanwhile, his witch, begrudging instructor has a really, really fun character to her. She's so, like, egotistical. Whenever we see her thoughts, it's presented in this really over-the-top kind of like shoujo parody art. She's kind of famous within the witching world, but she has this like bizarre self-image where we see like her autobiography and it's like a face that looks very much nothing like hers, like yassified. It's so much fun. Right off the bat, you can tell there's just such a focus on having a sense of humor, of building a lively world where kind of anything can happen. A focus on making you intrigued as to what all the different types of magical beasts are out there and what kind of spells they confer. I'm just really, really liking it. I'm going to give it an A+. I have a lot of hope for the series. And I'll show you, though, the reason I am very, very excited for this, the most exciting thing about it to me, is its setting, okay? There is a trend in Jump lately that is even more dominant than the exorcism trend, or the hitman trend, or the raising children trend, and it is the real world trend. These are the series that take place in just the real world with no supernatural elements whatsoever. Sakamoto Days and Shinobi Undercover, which is another new one we'll be talking about. You can say, well, they're kind of supernatural because they have like very over-the-top action. But there isn't any actual magical things in either of those, outside of kind of like some ESP stuff in Sakamoto Days. But, you know, the setting is Earth. It's Japan. It's just our world. HakuTaku as well, we're going to talk about later, but is just another real-world slice of life type of series. Then the biggest group by far, real world with fantasy. You know, none of these take place in a fantasy world. None of these ever stray outside of Japan for the most part. Undead Unluck definitely does, but these are all just real world series where people have supernatural powers or there's fantastical mechanics or everything. But they take place in the real world. And instead of, oh, we're going to go to the fabled continent of Urgaroth and see all of the magical beasts that live there, we're going to go to America. And they operate often in a mode where you're meant to kind of like anticipate how their version of the world will do XYZ thing in the real world. But at the end of the day, it's very, very different, I think, in feeling and in world building and in a sense of adventure than a truly fantasy world series. So what is in Jump right now that actually takes place in a fantasy world? There's One Piece. There's Hunter x Hunter. Both of these, by the way, from the 90s. And then the only one that has started in any recent period, Ichi the Witch. That's it. Now, I don't want to speak too definitively on saying that, oh, this is like a recent trend. I'd want to do some statistics on past eras in Jump. But it really seems to me like there used to be a lot more fantasy world series. That used to be kind of like the default. That if you're going to make a big shonen adventure, yeah, you're going to make a whole world for them to live in. And I really miss that. I think those are really fun to read. I love seeing all of the species, all of the cities, all of the culture. You can do anything. And I think that's kind of why they don't do it, is because we live in an era of Jump where people are much more skittish about short serializations, about getting axed. Which in turn I think is because, we talked about this before, but I think it's because now manga is so much more persistent. So if you have a series that's kind of a dud and it gets canceled in 20 chapters or whatever, beforehand that series would persist only as like a tankobon that might circle around Book Off and in like 20 issues of Jump that will sit on the shelves in Mandarake. But that's just it. It doesn't really tarnish your reputation. People aren't going to associate you with it. You can go on to bigger and better things scot-free. Whereas now, if you have a series that gets axed, it will live forever on the internet. There will be like a fan wikia of it. There will be discussion threads about it. And when people look up your mangaka name, they will see it in your bibliography, and they'll see it lasted like 2 volumes. And so I think it feels more embarrassing for creators now, for mangaka now, to make a series that's a dud, and yet at the same time, series are getting axed just as fast as they've ever been. You will probably inevitably at some point in your career make a series that bombs, and so they're a lot more strategic about how they spend those opening chapters. And the biggest thing this leads to is to not be overly ambitious, because I think it's a lot more embarrassing to set up a whole fantasy world, all of these mechanics, all of these unique things, and then have it all come crashing down within 20 chapters than it is to have a story set in the real world, where you offer up a whole lot of the world building and stuff as being like, well, it's just Tokyo, but there's spirits. It's just Tokyo, but they have magic swords. And so, if you have to wrap it up early, it doesn't feel like there's a million unfulfilled promises lurking around. A recent series that actually fully, with its chest out, took place in a fantasy world was Mama Yu, which I really enjoyed. And it ran for maybe 20 chapters. And when it ended, it really did feel like, oh, you did not want that. It did not feel like a planned ending at all. They actually even gave it a bonus chapter to try to wrap things up. But it certainly felt like in every chapter, the intent was, hey, this is going to run for 100, 200, 300 chapters. And I think the fantasy world was a big part of that. So it's like, that's kind of how it is, and it makes sense to me, but it sucks because I love fantasy worlds. I want to read things in this genre. I want to read things that are full of ideas and world building and uniqueness. And so we gotta hope that Ichi the Witch does well. We can only hope, because if it does poorly, it's not gonna look good. The next thing that came in was the series Shinobi Undercover. The premise here is our main dude is the most talentedest ninja of his age ever. He's just a high school kid, but he is #1 at these tactical ninja extraction missions, blah, blah, blah. He is assigned a long-term mission where he has to go undercover at a normal high school and keep this girl, who is the heiress to a gigantic corporation and is constantly being attacked by kidnappers, out of harm's way, without revealing to her or anyone else at the school that he is in fact an undercover ninja. He's accompanied by some other ninja who are undercover there that I think are going to be kind of our major side characters. And then, this girl is like super clumsy, but he's super shy. It kind of just writes itself after that point, and so far it really has been writing itself. I wouldn't say there really is too much interesting in the series. I think the art style is nice, the characters are nice and expressive, the action sequences have some nice choreography. They seem to be doing kind of like a Sakamoto Days type thing, where the battles are very ad hoc, they can happen everywhere and anywhere, and you make use of the terrain and the tools that are around you, which Sakamoto Days does brilliantly, and I think the series does all right. I will say, after only 3 chapters, this whole idea of he's trying to look and act like a normal kid, and then when people's backs are turned, he does ninja art and somehow disguises it as like an accident, which is a fun idea, but already the scenarios are kind of wearing thin. Already I kind of feel like they've run out of ideas, which is not great. And then the whole like social aspects, where it's also this sort of slice of life story about him coming out of his shell and making friends, and her trying to just have a normal life even though she is in such a weird position. That to me as well is just not very interesting. These sort of like over the top socially anxious characters, I think, have a very low hit rate for me. They typically are just very annoying, and it's hard to get me to sympathize with them because it's just so over to the top that it doesn't really feel like it's doing any service or charity or empathy to actually socially awkward people. Just sort of feels like a satire of them that is more just like bullying the idea that you could be so awkward. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan. I want to give it a chance. I think there's some solid fundamentals here, especially with the art. I think this premise could become interesting. There might be kind of more interesting arcs or whatever. But I think it's going to suffer a lot of the same problems as Kill Bill, or Kill Blue, that is. Just this whole premise of I'm a ordinary student, but I also am super powerful, underworld type. You can't really get all that much out of it, and you got to be really smart at what other elements you add, or else it's just going to start feeling like a mess. So we'll see. We'll see. It's B minus. We'll give it a B minus. All right, the last new series, HakuTaku. Look at that art style. Look at that real classic 90s art style, or maybe early 2000s. You love to see it. You really love to see it. This series feels like it is a beacon from the universe. As someone who has ambitions to make a video game and friends who have ambitions to make a video game, but none of us have the time or motivation to make a video game. This series is about two kids who start making a video game. And I love it. This is a genre that Jump has tackled on occasion, the most famous, of course, being Bakuman, which looked at the production of manga, where basically it's about sort of quirky, likable characters coming together on some sort of artistic project. It's a genre I really, really love. I love when they dive into the subject itself, where it's kind of educational, where you can really relate to the characters' passions. To me, one of the most moving types of scene in all of anime is when a character is watching the reception of their work, watching people applaud what they've done, watching it kind of do everything they had hoped it would, and they like tear up a little bit, and then I tear up a little bit. You know, an anime about making games, New Game, had some scenes like this that really got to me, even though it's otherwise a pretty typical kind of moe slice of life. So yeah, I think the series has a lot of potential in that. I like that even after that sort of big moment in the first chapter, they subverted it and made it not so idyllic. But of course, you know, with its compelling aspects for our characters. I liked the way they depicted the game they made. I felt like it was reasonable. Like, it didn't seem like something insane for a couple high school students to make. I liked that they dived into the really kind of tedious and frustrating elements of making a game, but in a way that highlighted the camaraderie that builds throughout them, that highlights the resilience that you build throughout doing that stuff. Yeah, there was a lot I really liked about this. I think the second chapter disappointed me a little bit because I wanted to just kind of keep up the pace. You know, keep making the game. You gotta keep making the game. And instead it kind of shifted gears into like backstory, into kind of a different emotional mode. And I kind of had the sense of like, okay, well, you have to do this. I have to kind of get it out of the way. Sure. So we'll see what happens after that. Hopefully it will kind of keep the focus on making the game and on that kind of educational mode, and really lean into this sort of fulfilling, satisfying, making a project type feeling, and less about the characters' drama, less about their own emotional needs or whatever. Sounds cruel of me to say, but you know, I'm reading Shonen Jump. I want something fun. So yeah, good stuff though overall. Really curious to see where it goes. I think it could go in a lot of different directions. It could even be a rom-com between these two. I don't think I would like that, but it could. You never know. So yeah, an interesting one for sure. Will I ever get off my ass and make a game? Time will tell. Anyways, this gets an A minus. So yeah, 3 new series. 2 of them I'm quite enthused about. Ichi the Witch especially. But if I had to predict the longevity of these series, it would actually be in reverse order of my appreciation for them. I think Ichi the Witch, there's a reason that Fantasy World series do not come around very often in the modern age of Jump. I think on top of the fact that mangaka are skittish about them, I just feel like readers are not that interested in them right now. You know, Mama Yu Yu, I think, had a lot of really great things going for it. Still got canned. Ichi the Witch, I think, is succeeding with flying colors and everything it intends to do. Might still get canned. Weekly Shonen Jump readers, they want to read stories about Japan. About high school kids going to school in Japan and then something crazy happens. Which is why I think Shinobi Undercover might be the longest runner of these three. It has like a rom-com element. It has girls. I think that's the secret for success right now. And then HakuTaku, I think I'm gonna guess maybe like a 2-year span, something like Cypher Academy, where it has a loyal fan base who finds it very interesting, and then a whole lot of people that are bored by it. But who knows? You know, Bakuman was a huge hit, ran for years and years and years. This could as well. It'll be interesting to see. This is why I did this, you know? Not just because I wanted to read any given series, not because I thought this was the best manga in the world that I absolutely needed to read, but because following the magazine, following its ups and downs, its ebbs and flows, its trends, its early cancellations, its new big hits, the growing and crumbling of pillars, that's what it's all about for me. That's what really makes it interesting for me. And this was a lively month. Here was the tier list last month. I covered up this part. Hee-haw. But yeah, you know. The tier list this month. Forgot to add JJK. Obviously JJK goes here as well. But yeah. It's still a very top-heavy list. Still really enjoying Jump. Let's see how it is at the end of October. Happy Halloween.